Hello, I'm Woody LaBounty.
And I'm Kerri Young.
We're from San Francisco Heritage, although of course we're not at San Francisco Heritage's headquarters right now because of the shelter in place order, but we're in our beautiful homes. You have a very nice looking apartment there, Kerri.
Thank you. And you have a very nice looking bookshelf.
It's a nice backdrop. We wanted to share one of our programs that we started this year called Heritage in the Neighborhoods with everybody. So let's just do it. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to talk about this exciting new program that we've started. There we go. Maybe I'll close myself up here. So the name San Francisco Heritage in the Neighborhoods is pretty self-explanatory. San Francisco Heritage's mission we'll talk about in a second, but the important thing is that this year we want to make sure that we bring our mission to every corner of San Francisco. So now, we turned 50 in 2021, which is next year, and a lot of people ask us, just in case you don't know, what does San Francisco Heritage do? Well, if you go to the front page of sfheritage.org, our website, you can see what we do. Heritage's mission is to preserve and enhance San Francisco's unique architectural and cultural identity. So usually when people hear that, these are the sort of questions they ask me. Or they say, oh, you save buildings, which is kind of true. And they say, can you stop my neighbor's house from being remodeled? This corner cafe from closing, this mural from being destroyed, this cute cottage from being demolished, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in essence, San Francisco Heritage does do all that. We meet with project sponsors when somebody proposes a remodel or a demolition of a significant building. We consult with the planning staff over at the City Hall. We talk with supervisors about projects. We testify at hearings, and we essentially use our influence to try to preserve San Francisco's architectural and cultural identity. But it's not easy to do everything, right, Kerri?
That's right. There's so much more that we can do. And obviously right now we're under very special circumstances here in the city, but development pressures are always everywhere here in San Francisco, and important landmarks and businesses are at risk of closing and being demolished every single day. And while we do the high-level advocacy work that Woody just mentioned, it's not always enough. And our team alone doesn't have the bandwidth all the time to take on every project in every neighborhood. And for us at Heritage, it's important to represent the entire city of San Francisco, and especially underrepresented areas not usually in the preservation spotlight. So in 2020, we are going to pilot this new community program, Heritage in the Neighborhoods, and go out to 3 neighborhoods in the city.
Yeah, we've actually already started. So here, let's talk about the neighborhoods we're focusing on in 2020. And I'm using this very cute cartoon map of San Francisco from 1939. And it also kind of shows how things haven't changed much in the way people perceive of these neighborhoods. The 3 neighborhoods for 2020 are the Marina, the Excelsior in the southeast part of the city, and the Parkside in the southern part of the Sunset District, southwest corner of the city. And if you look even at kind of get a closer look at the map in 1939, you can see how these neighborhoods were sort of imagined in the city's imagination. The Marina is downhill from Pacific Heights, and you have this society woman with her dog, but there's not much being shown east of the Palace of Fine Arts. In the Excelsior, it's even worse. It's like there's a woman on a horse, and people
are leaving.
Yeah, and people are trying to drive away from where the Excelsior would be to go somewhere else. And the Parkside, well, there's Sigmund Grove and really just a bunch of beige land, which it kind of belies the actual neighborhoods that are there and the resources that are present. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, is highlight those.
Yeah, and you only have to look at this map of the San Francisco city landmarks that we have, 288 of them. But of those 288, it's very underrepresented in our 3 neighborhoods here, as you can see. Most of the landmarks are in the upper northeast, downtown, but our three neighborhoods really aren't without their own historic resources.
Yeah, this is just to show there's not much recognition of these places, but it's not because these neighborhoods are necessarily new. Our first neighborhood this year, the Excelsior, was platted as a map and most of the street names put in way back in 1869, just as the city is really developing. So it's an old neighborhood. It's been there a long time. It developed slowly. I mean, I have to admit, you look at this picture, this is an aerial view looking west towards Sutro Forest over here. And you can see there's a lot of agricultural fields still in the neighborhood. It was the dairy and vegetable truck farming part of the city for many, many decades, even into the 20th century. Lots of farmers, small scale farms would raise vegetables and bring the produce to market in the city to sell. And some of the early buildings you're going to find from that time are still around. This is Outer Mission Street. These are two commercial buildings that if you look at them, you may pass them, not notice them, but you look closely, they have a lot of Victorian styling still present on the upper part of the house, of the buildings here. We think they're from around the 1890s. Here they are in a 1915 photograph. You can see the two buildings here. These are probably some of the earliest, if not the earliest, commercial buildings on Outer Mission Street.
Yeah, and there they are again in 1919, next to the Bell Theater with this very cool clamshell entrance.
I wish that was there. That's cool.
Yeah.
But, this is why we're going to these neighborhoods, to highlight not only these early buildings, but to talk about the threats. These two buildings are slated to be demolished to build this structure, at least to keep the palm tree, it looks like. But it's a pretty revealing drawing to kind of show how these neighborhoods are looked at by some people. Even the surrounding buildings are just gray boxes, even though they have character. And so people don't recognize some of the history and heritage in places like the Excelsior. If you look around the neighborhood up and down the hill, you'll see a lot of vernacular architecture, which is just as old, really speaks to the time when it was a suburban, almost farmhouse part of the city. This is a cool building, early 20th century firehouse that has been repurposed as a residence and is known for what, Kerri?
It is known for being in The Princess Diaries. If you've ever seen that movie, one of my favorites.
A little bit of Hollywood in the Excelsior, but all sorts of interesting and unique and fairly unrecognized structures of residences all through the Excelsior.
And there are also so many, row houses as well beneath the large blue water tower in the Excelsior, kind of hidden up there in the hills. The top is Lisbon Street, the bottom is London Street. And, many of these can, for example, be turned into historic districts.
Right, you can get some sort of protection by designating them and keep that row intact.
Mm-hmm.
Commercial structures, I think, are probably what the Excelsior, if people do know the Excelsior, if they don't live out there, they probably at least know Outer Mission, some of these great buildings, Kerri.
Yeah, there's so many different buildings and different eras and styles that are active community spaces and not yet landmarked. And so some great examples of these are in the upper left, we have the Beaux-Arts Hibernia Bank building, built in 1928, which has been repurposed as a Mexican market. On the upper right, we have the Valenti Marini Parada and Company funeral home building, originally built in 1925 in the Italian Renaissance revival style, and remodeled to its current incarnation sometime in the 50s. It's mid-century modern style. It is slated to be demolished at some point in the near future, unfortunately. The lower left-hand corner, we have a really great unique example of a building in the international style, built in 1949, designed by master modern architect Mario Ciampi, who designed many other great buildings in the Excelsior. And recently we found out from our research assistant, William, that this building was originally erected for the Safeway Employee Credit Union as office space. But today it's a bright yellow laundromat.
It's
And
the coolest laundromat. I gotta say, I want to do my laundry there just looking at it.
yes, me too. And lastly, we have the three parapets of the Art Deco and Storybook Royal Baking Company building, which is really a special building, I think.
Yeah, this is, we've done a lot of work this year on it in starting heritage in the neighborhoods, helping the planning department come up with a designation to make this the first city landmark in the Excelsior proper. That three-pointed crown, appropriately for the Royal Baking Company, is very stunning. But if you look on the left here, this building, this Storybook storefront, is actually part of the same structure and was built at the same time. Originally, this was to kind of go back to the Italian-American heritage that the Excelsior had in the 19th century. This was the Sorrento Macaroni Company. The front was the Royal Baking, which was an Italian and Basque-owned bakery, and they sold Italian delicacies, desserts, and bread. And the storefront and deli was on this side. But the storybook part is really, again, you're like in a fairy tale here. It's like Hansel and Gretel or something, and that's where they bought their Italian bread. This was an idea of kind of calling back to fairy tale type architecture. And it's neat that it's mixed here with this very striking Art Deco building on the south side. Okay, that's the Excelsior. We're going to talk a lot more about that. We have tons of information. We've done posts and all sorts of slideshows, pictures, different kinds of historical information on the Excelsior already. But coming up, we're going to be doing our second neighborhood, which is the Parkside District, Kerri.
Yeah, so coming up, hopefully in a few months, we want to focus on this district. And for those of you who don't know, it's, closer out by the ocean. Here you can see on the bottom of the screen what is today Stern Grove. And, typically considered the southern border of the Parkside District. You have 33rd Avenue on the west, Ortega in the north, 15th on the east. And when the Parkside was first developed, way back in 1908, there, much like the Sunset, there really wasn't much out there, just lots of sand dunes, right, Woody?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look at this picture, these guys trying to sell Parkside Realty, and they're basically in the Sahara Desert.
Yeah, but they staked their claim, and this Parkside slowly started being built, as that real estate map shows. And when I say slowly, I mean slowly. And this photo is from 1920, so quite a few many years after 1908. And there's still, not very many houses out there. But for the houses that, did go up during that time, if you look really closely today, some of those houses are still standing and hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, so that's around 34th Avenue in Terra Val. Terra Val is the main commercial strip, and there are early houses that are still standing on Terra Val from these very beginnings of the Parkside District. This is a row of 3 homes built by one of the directors of the Parkside Realty Company, a builder named Hugh Keenan, who also was the architect and builder of the Grateful Dead house in the Haight-Ashbury, by the way. But we talk about threats to these neighborhoods. This house is gone. This house has been demolished. Only the one on the end is still standing in that row, 1420 Terra Val. But the owner has been trying to get this torn down. But you look at it, it's still got a lot of it's got its integrity from the time of which it was built, before 1910, right at the beginning of the Parkside's development. It's a craftsman home. It's got its original porch roof. It carries its significance of its time and its place to today. This is what they want to replace it with, which is a fairly common building we've been seeing going up all over in every neighborhood of the city the last 10 years. Plain, utilitarian, does not call to the Parkside, does not bring any of the heritage. The project is being appealed by neighbors, and that's part of heritage in the neighborhoods, is we want to activate and help the people who are already there making these fights in the neighborhoods. We'll have to see what the ultimate fate of 1420 Terra Val is going to be, though. And it's not the only, form of craftsman architecture you're going to find in the Parkside. There's lots of examples.
Yeah, there are lots of great examples of craftsman homes, as you can see here, out in the neighborhood, as well as some great Mediterranean revival styles that the area is known for, right?
Yeah, you get these sort of stucco homes all through the Sunset District, but there's really high-end, elaborate versions of this Mediterranean revival style in the Parkside with shaped staircases and these sort of details around the windows and reliefs and very, very, again, storybook feeling, but with a sort of Mediterranean, Spain and Italy feeling to it.
And another example of, just buildings that are still around, this is Terra Val, which is the Parkside's main commercial district, looking towards 21st and Terra Val. A lot of these buildings are still remaining as they were in this photo taken in 1946.
Yeah, if you stood in the middle of the road today, the cars would be different, but the buildings on either side are pretty much intact. I love this one on the right with its very Art Deco parapet. It's had changes, but that top is still there today.
Mm. And the Parkside has, many institutional buildings too that certainly qualify as landmarks, for example, like the Parkside Branch Library. And this was the first actually of 8 modern libraries designed by architects Appleton and Wolford in the 50s and 60s for the San Francisco Public Library. And at the time, the design was really successful. And following the pattern of this Parkside branch, which was the first, all of their libraries looked more like suburban homes rather than institutional buildings. They had exposed wood beam ceilings, patios, reading lounges, and even a fireplace to really make people feel like they're at home in an informal setting.
Yeah, and a lot of these Appleton and Wolford library branches have been made, or at least a couple of them have been made city landmarks, but the first one, this Parkside Branch Library, has not. So there's a candidate right there. Another one I like, which is less visible probably to the general public, because it's kind of tucked away on the north side of Stern Grove, is at 30th and Escolta. It's the Pinehurst Lodge. It was opened in the 1920s by the Junior League as essentially a refuge for women who were traveling, who needed a place to stay for a couple of nights. Perhaps they were widows or waiting for their serviceman husband to come be transferred in the city. It's since that time served under the Salvation Army since the 40s, still been a refuge and a shelter for women who need care for some reason. They are going through some sort of transition and they just need a place to stay, a homey place to stay. Right now, the Salvation Army uses it for a substance abuse program for women. So it's had a long, rich history of service in the Parkside, a beautiful building, brick with a lot of detailing inside. Another one of my favorite buildings, I think, deserves a little more recognition. Okay, so we're going to do the Parkside in the summer, and we're going to have a lot of events and information about that. But our third 2020 Heritage in the Neighborhoods target is the Marina District. What can you tell me about the Marina District, Kerri?
So the Marina District is, out there by the Palace of Fine Arts. We're talking north of Lombard Street. We know that Cow Hollow, that it's really close by to the marina. They have a lot of great, it has a lot of great historic resources, but we want to focus specifically here on the marina. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're trying to make a difference here between the marina is a little under surveyed and recognized compared to the houses up the hill, right? A lot of early and some great landmarks that are south of Lombard Street.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is kind of why the marina's newer, right? This is the bay. You could see most of the marina's landfill. This gas tank holder is relatively where the Safeway is today, and Fort Mason over here. But it was all water until something filled it in.
Yeah, it was filled in for a specific reason. In the era of great World's Fairs, San Francisco, we had our own World's Fair, the Panama Pacific International Exposition, or the PPIE, in 1915. And it was built really to celebrate the opening of the Panama Canal and San Francisco's resilience after the 1906 earthquake. Here you can see the zone with a capital Z in the foreground, looking back towards the Tower of Jewels rising there in the background, and the trees of the Presidio.
Yeah.
And this is a map of the PAE Fairgrounds from the California Historical Society. And on the left, you can see the outline of the Palace of Fine Arts and its lagoon, of course, designed by famous architect Bernard Maybeck, and one of the more famous buildings left over from the fair. Actually, the most famous building left over from the fair.
Yeah, pretty much the only one in place for sure. So after the fair's over, they're fill in the fairgrounds with housing. And while you have on the west side, you've got this traditional grid pattern of the city map. There were actually attempts to do some different things with this land, more of a resident.
What's going on there with the grid?
Yeah, it was something that they were coming up with, something called Marina Gardens. And every time I walk through there, Alhambra Street and Majorca Way, I get lost, but they're beautiful buildings tucked in this area. They were trying for something a little higher end. They were trying for something a little different. And like I said, most people aren't aware of the resources in the buildings that are tucked away between the Bay and Lombard Street. See, this is them filling it in. Look, this is what they've got to work with. There's one thing you can really recognize here.
Yeah, that's right. You can see the Palace of Fine Arts is still remaining after all the fair buildings were taken down. And, the Palace of Fine Arts rightly has world recognition. It's world famous and we love it. But there are so many other historic resources in the marina that we want to focus on, like some amazing apartment buildings.
Yeah, potential. I mean, these are things that we just want people to see. It's very rare that apartment buildings get any sort of recognition or designation for protections. But look at these entryways just in the marina. You've got something that looks like very high, elaborate European, and then you've got these Art Deco entry over here. It's just you go around the world, essentially, and they don't do this with apartment buildings or multi-unit buildings anymore. They don't take the time to have this level of craftsmanship and detailing. And then, of course, Kerri, we often, I think when people think of the marina, they may think of Chestnut Street and the great commercial structures that are over there and the businesses.
Yeah, that's right. And if you look up, there are so many colorful examples. Here's some great Art Deco, streamlined modern examples of buildings. There's the Presidio Theater as well. And many of these buildings also house legacy businesses, like the lower left there with the Rolo clothing store. And as part of Heritage in the Neighborhoods, we really want to emphasize that legacy businesses are one of the great things that we want to be able to preserve and protect that are important parts of these neighborhoods as well.
Right. We want to work with each neighborhood. Each neighborhood has different strengths. Each neighborhood has different needs. So the preservation projects that the people who live in these neighborhoods and protect them have in mind are going to vary. And sometimes we'll be focusing on businesses. Sometimes we'll be focusing on structures or artwork. And some surprising things, like I love the Safeway, the Marina Safeway. It might seem kind of utilitarian to a lot of folks, but this is the first version of this kind of Safeway that was put all over the United States. You would find Safeways of this style in Georgia, and Alabama, and they always were called Marina style Safeways. This is the first one, this very modern arched roof with the big glass wall. So again, something you may not think about, but definitely a significant building right here in the Marina District. And then around the world, Kerri.
Exactly. This is another example of us going around the world with just like the apartment building entrances.
We got palm trees, and then over here you're in Seville, Spain. These again are apartment buildings.
Also, and we also have the Marina Motel as well, which is a great early example of a motor lodge where, originally, people could stay on their way to seeing the newly opened Golden Gate Bridge along Lombard.
Yeah, you don't, again, kind of building a structure, a form that doesn't get protection are early motels. And this is a
Mhm.
very early one, still intact. It definitely calls to the time of the opening of the Golden Gate Bridge and when Lombard Street became Highway 101. All right, so Kerri, we've talked about the three neighborhoods and why they're important, why they have threats that we want to address, but what are the basic goals of the Heritage in the Neighborhoods program?
Yeah, the first goal is that we really want to bring a citywide focus. We want to bring heritage resources to these three neighborhoods and more neighborhoods beyond, of course. And those are spotlights, by the way. I thought that that was clear, but I guess perhaps they are not.
It's kind of an odd icon, I gotta say. I think the second real goal that we're really focusing on is to get something done. And so to work with the neighbors and the community groups in these neighborhoods, to listen, to talk, to come up with an accomplishment, a preservation focused accomplishment, whether it be designating a legacy business or creating a landmark, a city designated landmark, something that we can build momentum from. Say, we got something done this year. And then out of that,
Yeah, and from that, and really maybe because of this third goal, is that we want to be able to foster affinity groups in each neighborhood. We don't want to just come into a neighborhood and tell people what they should preserve and protect. We would really love the input of the community, of neighbors who live there, and others to form a group and work together towards a preservation accomplishment.
yeah, it's multiplying the preservation effort across the city. We can't do it all. We want to like help and foster these other groups to do it, for the whole city. So the way we're doing this, we have a website, of course, sfheritage.org, but it's become a lot more robust with right now tons of information on the Excelsior district, resources, studies that have already been done, partners and community groups that you can reach through the website, links, media content, everything about the neighborhood that we're focusing on will be going through sfheritage.org.
Yeah, so you can visit our website right now and find all of our resources, articles, historic photos on the Excelsior, which we've been already covering, as what you mentioned.
Yeah.
And we want to push out as much media as possible about these three neighborhoods, such as articles in our Heritage News and on social media. And actually, the Heritage News, the latest version that just came out, is focused on the Parkside. So
Yeah, and available to everybody. We're not just giving it just to our supporters and our members this time. We're sharing it with the world. So go to sfheritage.org, sign up for our mailing list, and read all about our efforts. Now, how else can you get involved? Well, if you have an interest in any of these three neighborhoods, the Excelsior, the Parkside, or the Marina, let us know. You probably know things we don't know, and we'd like to share it with the world. We'd love any information we can get. It's all about supporting and putting a spotlight on those neighborhoods.
yeah, and you can also nominate a legacy business or landmark. If you have a special place in one of these neighborhoods that you know of that you think deserves special attention, please reach out to us and let us know.
Right, and you might want to be part of one of these affinity groups we're forming. So we're going, right now our events are, of course, are held up by the current situation that we're all under, but we're going to have events, more Heritage in the Neighborhoods events coming forward. Maybe you want to be part of an affinity group in one of these neighborhoods, and just go to sfheritage.org to read more about what we're doing. We might have a lot more virtual events along this style. And in the future, we were going to have a big Heritage in the Neighborhoods Excelsior event at the Italian American Social Club, which we'll put off for now. But I just want to point out that this is all done in partnership with groups from around the city and in the neighborhoods. This is a citywide effort. We have the Victorian Alliance of San Francisco. We have our friends at Western Neighborhoods Project and Open SF History, and community groups like the Excelsior Action Group. So it's not just Heritage doing this. We're trying to get everybody involved because we all love this city and we all want to defend the neighborhoods. So here's our contact info if you want to get in touch with us. And we really just encourage you to go to sfheritage.org, get on our mailing list, reach out to us, and help support heritage in the neighborhoods.
Yes, please do. And follow us on social media as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Kerri. I hope this has been a satisfactory virtual event. It was the first one for heritage, I think.
Yes. Thanks, Woody.